Hello, and welcome to the 2017 Lead-Based Paint Capital Fund Program Grant. This is actually a update and a reissue of the previously announced 2017 Lead-Based Paint Grant that was announced earlier last year in March. This is a reissue where, under the same announcement, they have provided additional funding for additional applicants. So they welcome you to apply for this grant so that you can have an opportunity to win up to $1 million for lead-based paint capital funding. I have a disclaimer for you. The free information we provide in this webcast is based on our interpretation of the grant announcement. The viewer, you, is advised that the publicly published grant announcement and the funding agency are the final authority on this subject grant. I would love to tell you a bit about myself. I am your presenter, Sarita Gibbons. I am the owner for Comprehensive Grants Management. I have been writing grants successfully over the last 12 years with an average 65% grant writing success rate. My hobbies are reading, painting, gardening, and playing the piano. Our firm, Comprehensive Grants Management, provides additional value to clients by presenting free online webcasts about currently available grant funding opportunities, such as this one. We have been in existence for the last 12 years. We are a full-time, full-year grant writing firm, and we provide grant writing services to clients nationwide. I have provided for you in the URL below a little bit about our company. This is our website URL. You will see a bit about our company, our grant writing team. We have a lot of information that we have shared with you. We have blogs and vlogs and articles, and I highly encourage you to visit our website to learn a little bit more about our grant writing firm. The purpose of this webcast is to do an overview for the 2019 Lead-Based Paint Capital Fund, the LBPCF, the Capital Fund. It is actually a update and a reissue. This is the second round of funding that's been made available by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that were not awarded under the first round of funding. So this grant is issued by HUD, and you can go to the URL presented below for additional grant application information assistance. The purpose of the Lead-Based Paint Capital Fund program is to help public housing authorities identify and eliminate lead-based paint hazards in public housing. HUD provided $25 million for the fiscal year of 2017, and it is being made available for competitive grants to public housing agencies to evaluate and reduce lead-based paint hazards in their public housing development by carrying out the activities of risk assessments, abatement, and interim controls. So remember that this is the second round of funding being made available. The first round of funding was issued in March of 2018, which was $25 million. This is the second round of funding, which is an additional $8 million. Comprehensive Grants Management also won 2 awards in the last round of funding For our clients listed here, it was such an honor and a privilege to work with both of these clients to win the awards for them. And so here they are celebrating their awards with that poster there. And so we wanted for the Dublin Housing Authority in Georgia, they're celebrating their award of $1 million for the Lead-Based Pain Capital Fund grant. We also have the North Bergen Housing Authority in New Jersey celebrating their award of $1 million for the Lead-Based Pain Capital Fund grant. So our clients, Dublin Housing Authority and North Bergen Housing Authority, they both won awards in the first round from us preparing and writing and submitting their grant application packages for them to HUD. So now they're awardees. So definitely take advantage of our services and have us write you a stellar grant application package. I have provided our contact information, so please feel free to give us a call at 813-949-2877. We can get started on your lead-based paint grant application right away. You can give us a call or you can send us an email at grants@comprehensivegrants.com. Let us know that you are a public housing authority that is in need of this grant and would like us to get started on your grant application right away. So you can give us a call or send us an email and we would be happy to work with your housing authority. For this grant, eligible public housing developments are described below. So the target housing is a public housing constructed prior to 1978. So this is very important for you to know. If you do have a public housing development, but it was constructed in 1980, you do not qualify. So you have to make sure and show evidence that your public housing development was actually constructed prior to 1978. Also, your public housing development must not be designated for the elderly and it cannot be designated for persons with disabilities. Also, it cannot have only studio units like zero bedroom dwellings. However, HUD did provide a exception to this where they say unless a child of less than 6 years of age resides in that unit where it's a studio, it's a zero bedroom dwelling. So that's the only exception there. So remember, it cannot be designated for the elderly or for persons with disabilities. So also another eligibility criterion for this grant, the public housing properties eligible for funding under this grant must have at least one family with a child under age 6 at the time of the application. So these are very important eligibility criterion for the public housing development that will enable you to be eligible for this grant. So unfortunately, this grant is not for Section 8 housing. It is only for public housing development housing. The funding agency stated some grant program activities for this grant program. So remember, this is a lead-based paint capital fund grant program. So one of the first grant program activities that you will use the up to $1 million, remember, up to $1 million is to do abatement. So abatement means any set of measures designed to permanently eliminate lead-based paint hazards in accordance with standards established by the EPA. Abatement includes the removal of lead-based paint and lead-contaminated dust, the permanent containment or encapsulation of lead-based paint, the removal of lead painted surfaces or fixtures, and the removal or covering of lead contaminated soil, and all preparation, cleanup, disposal, and post abatement clearance testing activities associated with such measures. So you can use the funding for abatement activities. Also, you can use it for clearance examination. So clearance examination means an activity conducted following lead-based paint hazard control to determine that the hazard control activities are complete and that no soil lead hazards or settled dust lead hazards as defined by the lead safe housing rule exist in the dwelling unit or work site. Another activity is the interim controls. So the interim controls mean a set of measures designed to reduce temporarily human exposure or likely exposure to lead-based paint hazards. So these interim controls can include, and you have to remember, interim controls are an eligible expense under this grant program. So you can spend the funding on repairs, painting, temporary containment, specialized cleaning, clearance, ongoing lead base paint maintenance activities, and the establishment and operation of management and resident education programs. So, interim controls of lead-based paint hazards, including lead, contaminated dust, and soil in housing, must include specialized cleaning techniques to address lead dust. This is very important. The next activity is the lead-based paint evaluation. So the lead-based paint evaluation means performing lead dust, soil, and painting chip testing, lead-based paint inspections, risk assessments, clearance examination, and engineering and architectural activities that are required for and in direct support of interim controls and lead hazard control work of the eligible public housing units that are constructed prior to 1978. So this is done to determine if there is actually a presence of lead-based paint or lead hazards from paint, from dust or soil using acceptable testing procedures. So this is another eligible activity. Also, you can use the grant funding for lead-based paint inspections. So lead-based paint inspections means a surface-by-surface inspection to determine the presence of lead-based paint and the provision of a report explaining the result of the inspection. So this is really good because this is where you get your report from an actual written tangible report. You get it from the actual inspection, not the evaluation. The other activity is the lead-based paint hazard control. The lead-based paint hazard control means the control or elimination of all lead-based paint hazards identified in housing units and in common areas of multi-family housing through either interim controls or lead-based paint abatement or a combination of both. And I'm happy to report this next one, which is relocation. So you can use some of the grant funding for relocation because while some of these repairs, painting, temporary containment, specialized cleaning, clearance, and all these lead-based paint activities are taking place, relocation of residents may become a reality. So relocation means carrying out temporary relocation for families and individuals while remediation is conducted and until the time the affected units receives clearance for reoccupancy. So they do have a time limitation on this though. They said that the funding agency expects that most temporary relocation for lead hazard control work would be for 30 days or less. So approximately 30 days or less is when you are able to provide relocation assistance. Finally, the final activity covered in this section is the risk assessment. So the risk assessment means an on-site investigation to determine the existence, nature, severity, and location of the lead-based paint hazards and the provision of a report by the individual or firm conducting the risk assessment, explaining the results of the investigation and options for reducing lead-based paint hazards. So note that risk assessments are performed by EPA or state certified risk assessors and include for the testing of deteriorated paint for lead, calibration of the XRF equipment at required intervals, a statistically valid sampling of units and building components within units based on the size of the property and construction history. So the funding agency stated that these are some of your grant program activities that you can spend the grant funding on. The grant due date is February the 19th, few days after Valentine's Day, and the funding agency gave us up to 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to submit our grants on time. So you must get your grants in on or before February 19th, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. Please make sure that you submit your grants on time successfully to the funding agency so that your applications can get reviewed. Eligible applicants for this grant program are public housing authorities and Indian housing authorities. Public housing authorities with the legal authority to develop, own, modernize, and operate a public housing development in accordance with the 1937 Act is eligible to apply. Please note that tribes and tribally designated housing entities, nonprofits, and resident associations are not eligible to apply for this lead-based paint grant. Very good to know for some housing authorities. The funding agency stated that PHAs that are troubled or under the direction of HUD or a court-appointed receiver are eligible for funding, provided that the agency is in compliance with any current memorandum of understanding or agreement or recovery agreements. So this is really good for troubled PHAs because if there is a need and they have an eligible development, they should definitely apply. They're not prohibited from applying because of their troubled status. So please remember that public housing authorities are the eligible applicant. Tribes and tribally designated housing entities, resident associations, and nonprofits do not apply, cannot apply for this grant. They are not eligible. The period of performance for this grant, the estimated project start date is April the 16th, 2019 to April the 15th, 2023. So that is the period in which that the funding agency wants you to exhaust all of your program activities and consume all of your requested grant amount. So this is the period of performance for this grant. The funding agency stated that they estimate to award 8 public housing authorities from this grant program. Remember that our firm, Comprehensive Grants Management, won 2 out of the grants that they awarded in the first round last year. And so the funding agency stated that they will award an additional 8 out of this second round. Very good news for applicants. There is no match required or cost share requirement. The grant award amount is $1 million. That means that an eligible applicant can request up to $1 million. The funding agency did give us some funding limitations, which you can include in your cost estimates. So the PHA may use a standard estimate of approximately 10,000 per unit for hazard control in multi-unit properties and 15,000 per unit for single family properties. However, costs may be less than these amounts for properties that have already had lead-based paint evaluation and hazard controls other than lead-based paint abatement performed, or for properties that were built after 1960. If the proposed work costs exceed the maximum award amount for this program of $1 million, you can propose a plan to perform interim controls and partial abatement until more capital funds are available. Or you can actually supplement this grant with existing capital funds already awarded. If this situation actually applies to your grant writing proposal, please endeavor to describe your plan for interim controls and partial abatement when you are describing your work plan. So please remember that for each unit of housing, if you're proposing a housing development that's a multi-unit property, then for each unit of housing, you calculate each unit at $10,000. That is how you can find out how much you qualify up to, which the ceiling is $1 million. But if each unit of housing is actually for single family properties, then for each unit it's $15,000. So $15,000 times the total number of units that you have. So remember, the maximum amount is $1 million. And even though they have proposed 10,000 per unit for multifamily and 15,000 per unit for single family, you can propose a lesser amount if your estimate comes back and it is less. So you can request less if you choose to do so. Do you know that lead-based paint in old houses can be a greater threat to a child's health than lead that may be under some industrial sites where there are no children? Well, believe it to be so, or so stated by Fred Thompson. Well, it's decision time for you. And here I have some questions to aid in your decision-making process. So the first question I have for you is, are you eligible for this grant? So this grant is for public housing authorities who has public housing units that have been built before 1978 and they have a lead-based paint issue. Is that you? Well, if that is you, then you are definitely eligible for this grant, even if you are a troubled housing authority, because troubled housing authorities can still apply. My next question for you is, do you have a need for this grant? So the need, of course, would be that you have identified or have some reason to believe that your public housing development has a lead-based paint issue. So if you have a need for this grant and you need grant funding to assist you with your lead-based paint control and removal activities, then yes, you do have a need for this grant. My final question is, do you want to apply for this grant? So if you have identified that yes for the first two questions, do you want to apply for this grant? The due date is February the 19th. And you may be thinking you don't have the expertise to apply for the grant, so you don't want to apply for the grant. But if you have decided that yes, you're up for the challenge and you do want to apply for the grant, then congratulations because you are one step closer to requesting $1 million in grant funding for the 2017 Lead-Based Paint Capital Fund Program Update and Reissue. If you have decided that you would like to apply for this grant, but you do not want to do the grant yourself in-house, well, that is why Comprehensive Grants Management exists. We are a full-time, full-year grant writing firm, and we work with clients nationwide. So remember, we worked with the North Bergen Housing Authority in New Jersey, and we also worked with the Dublin Housing Authority in Georgia. They're states away, but we were able to successfully work with those two clients and actually win them the lead-based paint grant last year. Each of those clients received the maximum grant award of $1 million. And we want to do the same for you. We want to take the burden off of your hands and create your grant application for you successfully and submit it to the funding agency. If you would like us to do so, please give us a call at 813-949-2877, or you can email us at grants@comprehensivegrants.com and let us know that you would like us to write the lead-based paint grant application for your public housing authority. If you've decided to do the grant yourself in-house, well, good luck to you. And we would so like to hear and get some feedback from you. If you can tell us how our webinar assisted you, and if you learned anything new, and if it helped you to prepare your grant application package. So until our next webinar, thank you for spending this time with me, and I will see you in our next webinar. Comprehensive Grants Management also won 2 awards in the last round of funding for our clients listed here. It was such an honor and a privilege to work with both of these clients to win the awards for them. And so here they are celebrating their awards with that poster there. And so we wanted for the Dublin Housing Authority in Georgia, they're celebrating their award of $1 million for the Lead-Based Paint Capital Fund grant. We also have the North Bergen Housing Authority in New Jersey celebrating their award of $1 million for the Lead-Based Paint Capital Fund grant. So our clients, Dublin Housing Authority and North Bergen Housing Authority, they both won awards in the first round from us preparing and writing and submitting their grant application packages for them to HUD. So now they're awardees. So definitely take advantage of our services and have us write you a stellar grant application package.